My earliest video game memory was when I was 4 years old. I was at a daycare center while my parents went out for the night, and in a little darkened room to the side, most of the kids were gathered around a single TV watching somebody play a video game. In it, a little green man was walking around a little forest outside a big cave and going into the cave to buy bombs from an old man. Oh, and dying. A lot. To the point that the sound that the little green man made when he died was kind of burned into my memory, so, of course, when I came across that sound again, I learned that this game was called The Legend of Zelda. The Legend of Zelda, a game series as old as the modern era of video games and one of Nintendo's flagship properties right alongside Mario and Pokémon. Whether it's exploring a huge world or taking part in an epic story, the universal appeal of high fantasy combined with easy pick-up-and-go gameplay with none of the crazy numbers found in other fantasy games makes it a favorite for many. In these games, you play as a little green elf boy named Link who has to save the land of Hyrule from the clutches of an evil pigman named Ganon. Oh, and there's somebody named Zelda in there too, I guess. All of the games are praised for their quality, and even Skyward Sword, widely considered the worst official Zelda game, worst official Zelda game, has many fans thanks to its characters, art direction, and dungeon design. The sacred calf of the franchise, however, is Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, the first ever 3D Zelda game for the Nintendo 64 console. A game that starts you out as a kid who is trying to protect the godlike power of a relic called the Triforce from a man named Ganondorf, who is Ganon before he got all roided out on the power of the Triforce. Of power. Yeah, he only got a third of it. The other two parts went to Link and Zelda. This is important, keep this detail in mind. Partway through this game, you grow up into adult Link, gain the power of the Triforce of Courage, and the evil-slaying Master Sword to finally take on Ganondorf. The game was a milestone in 3D gameplay thanks to its use of a lock-on feature called Z-targeting, making it easier to aim in 3D, and is a point of pride for the Zelda fandom as it is frequently given the title of Best Video Game Ever Made. But there have been some grumblings lately about Ocarina of Time, such as how not only is the game probably not the best ever made, it might not even be the best Zelda game ever made.
What?
People have come to appreciate things like the subtle complexities of Majora's Mask, or the charming and surprisingly timeless art style of Wind Waker, which seem to make Ocarina of Time seem dull and straightforward by comparison. And yeah, even I admit that Ocarina of Time wouldn't even make it into my Zelda top 3. I mean, it makes sense after all. The series has moved on, and a lot of the ideas of Ocarina have been iterated on or left obsolete. As a result, the fandom has entered a sort of identity crisis. The idea that Ocarina was the best was a huge part of the fandom's point of pride, and seeing that brought into question has caused a bit of a freakout. And so a lot of Ocarina fans' ire has been aimed at the game that was made in its image. I've heard the complaints about this game plenty of times.
The grass is brown, the sky is blue.
These dungeons have moved far away from the intricate level design of classic Zelda. A stupid spinning dumbass top thing doesn't change anything.
But what do I think? Well, I think that Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess is awesome. Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess is my favorite Zelda game ever made. It's the first Zelda game I ever beat, though not the first one I ever owned. I love the story, I love the characters, I love this version of Link, I just love it. But perhaps we should set the stage here. Ocarina of Time's console, the Nintendo 64, had been retired in favor of new hotness, the Nintendo GameCube, and as a teaser was introduced with an in-engine scene of adult Link and Ganondorf locked in epic sword combat. It got people so excited for the next Zelda game and eager for a follow-up on their precious Ocarina with next-gen technology. And what they got was... Yeah, people were not happy when this game was revealed. While it's better appreciated today, at the time people balked at the sight of a colorful, cartoony baby game with a story as short as its protagonist. There was outrage. What's this? Where's the game based on the dark and awesome second half of Ocarina of Time? The promise of the next generation! The thing you showed off in your trailer! Faced with this, Nintendo made the only sensible call and gave the people what they wanted. In a packed theater at E3 2004, Nintendo gave an exclusive reveal of their latest game, The camera pans across awesome scenery, the orchestral music swells, the anticipation builds, and all it took was a single glimpse of adult Link on horseback for the entire room to go insane. Looking back, I don't think I have ever seen a more powerful reaction to an E3 trailer outside of Snake's introduction to Smash Bros. Especially not today. Honestly, today I think people just clap out of politeness.
That's right. Human NPCs are coming to Fallout 76.
While initially developed for the Nintendo GameCube, it did eventually get repurposed for motion controls for a simultaneous release as a launch title for Nintendo's best ever selling home console, the Nintendo Wii.
We would like to play.
Ya waggle the moat, Link waggles his sword. Not one-to-one, but in hindsight, maybe that was for the best. Twilight Princess is a game set in the distant future from Ocarina of Time, which, thanks to multiverse theory, is a follow-up of the game's best timeline, where Link travels back in time to become his younger self again and, together with the young Princess Zelda, manage to convince the king that Ganondorf is up to no good, getting him sealed away in a phantom zone before any of his plans come to fruition. The result is a thriving Hyrule that averted disaster, where folks of all races and clans freely mingle and where people generally feel secure. I always found it kind of funny that the game with the dreariest color palette has the happiest setting, whereas the silly colorful game is in a literal apocalyptic scenario where everything is underwater. Anyway, within this peaceful, prosperous Hyrule is a little hick town called Ordon Village, where our story begins. It is here that we meet this game's version of Link, who in this case is a goat herd who lives towards the edge of town. And we take a part in Link's daily life. We speak with the townsfolk, do some little side quests, and show off our combat skills to the local kids. You go fishing, buy a slingshot, and even save those kids from the local goblin population. The intro segment gets its fair share of flack for being so long and how it includes a lot of stuff that really doesn't matter in the long run, but it's really only a problem on subsequent playthroughs. The intro sequences in other Zelda games are intended to get you familiar with the new controls and have you run a bunch of errands to figure that out, but if you already know what you're doing, like if you're playing the game a second time, you get little shortcuts that let you get into the story proper. The opening of Twilight Princess sadly doesn't have any of those shortcuts, but I cannot understate just how important this opening is for establishing Link as a character. It doesn't just help you learn the controls, but it also establishes Link's place in the community. The adults like you, the kids idolize you, and the mayor is totally cool with you hanging out with his daughter. It also helps that I'm really good at the goat herding game. It's the first time I ever really felt a sense of belonging in a game, which means that when the adventure happens and it's finally time to go, it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's not the first time a Legend of Zelda game has done this, like you're parting with Saria, and nothing can replace Grandma. But for the first time, I really felt like I was part of a community, and I wasn't just leaving behind a couple of loved ones, but everybody. It's made extra painful by the traumatic fashion in which it happens, which prevents you from getting a proper goodbye. Oh boy, I guess it's time to get into it. After the game's introduction, Link's mentor sits him down and tells him that he is finally going to leave the village and visit Hyrule Castle for the first time. As both a character and a player, this is exciting. We're just one night's sleep away from finally going out and finding our real adventure. But, as with other Legend of Zelda games, adventure has a habit of coming and finding you. A bandit calling himself King Bulblin and his minions attack and kidnap several of the villagers as well as your horse. Link frantically gives chase but is instead confronted by a wall of shadow. A beastly hand reaches out and pulls Link in, revealing a twilight dimension that has formed over the land of Hyrule. The curse of this place causes Link to turn into a wolf. Link returns to town to gather the things he needs to progress, but the remaining town people, still high-strung from Bulblin's attack, people who just minutes ago were treating you with such love and care, think that you're a monster and attack. You don't want to hurt them, but they don't know that, and the irony makes this moment sting so much more. You don't get a tearful send-off like in other games. Instead, you get kicked out by people who don't recognize what you've become. It feels terrible. Which I think is one of the things that fans miss about Wolf Link, the game's gimmick feature where Link gets turned into a wolf whenever he enters an area under the effects of Twilight. Wolf Link kinda sucks to play as, but feeling helpless and wanting to return to normal is kinda the point. A similar thing happens in Metroid Zero Mission, where Samus Aran loses her awesome space armor and has to run around a pirate ship basically defenseless, but once she gets that armor back, it's time to kick all sorts of butt. You see, that's how these video games work. You take something away so that people appreciate it more when they get it back. I mean, Wolf Link can do some cool stuff like dig holes and fight invisible enemies, but it's otherwise like an extended version of the rabbit from Link to the Past, which serves the same function. Throughout the game, you are forced to explore an area first as Wolf Link and recover the lost powers of the local spirits of light in order to purge the Twilight from the region and go back to normal. A lot of people see that as repetitive gameplay, but I would argue otherwise. While Wolf Link himself is fairly helpless, he gets some help from this little imp called Midna. Midna is this game's partner character, a Zelda tradition starting again with Ocarina, though we also get hints of this in Link to the Past with Sahasrasalas,
Shalashishka. La shashishka Shishka. Osala.
Anyway, a partner character acts as Link's helper, letting him target enemies, get information, get hints for puzzles, and act as a mouthpiece for the silent protagonist Link. While the majority of these characters are seen as a bit of a nuisance, especially when they chime in on a puzzle you'd rather solve yourself, Midna is seen as an exception and is frequently people's favorite partner character, if not favorite Zelda character overall. You see, when Link went wolf for the first time, he actually wound up getting captured and locked up, which is where he meets Midna. Unlike a lot of other partner characters, Midna cuts the crap and says that she'll release Link, but he works for her now. Her slightly abrasive attitude actually helps the game feel, as you don't feel guilty defying her orders on occasion to go exploring. This sassiness, combined with what we learn about her later, is what has made Midna so popular. With Midna on his back, Wolf Link has many more options, able to use Midna's prehensile ponytail to grab switches and stun enemies. She even carries your stuff for you. She also has this little trick where she turns herself into a targetable object to let Link leap across ledges to get to new areas, which, thanks to her sassy attitude, you always secretly hope you'll actually catch her. I often see people misattribute these as skill challenges, whereas really they're a part of Wolf Link's unique way of moving around the world. You see, Wolf Link doesn't have the same moves as human Link. Rather than jogging around, climbing, and using items, this Link can dig through holes, follow scent trails, and jump around at Midna's instruction. So while you are exploring an area you will soon come back to, the content isn't really wasted since you still have to figure out how to get human Link through these areas. Like the clues in Sly 2, it's more just a chance to reconnoiter and get some important plot details from the people of the world who have been turned into mere spirits by the corruption of the Twilight, under siege from warped Twilight beasts. The Wolf Link sections aren't also mercifully short. Wolf Link is fast, and all you have to do is squash some bugs to restore the light spirits to power. You spend way more time as human Link, though the gimmick is much better integrated into this game than time travel was in Ocarina, and at least once, after all the spirits are restored and the Twilight is banished, you'll break out Wolf Link in order to track something by scent. But how did we get here? Why is Hyrule covered in Twilight in the first place? And why does Link turn into a wolf instead of just a spirit? This is where we meet our villain, Zant. A powerful spellcaster from the realm of Twilight, Zant uses his dark powers to invade Hyrule, suppress the spirits of light, and unleash the Twilight across the lands. He has to do this because otherwise beings of Twilight cannot survive outside of their realm, hence why Midna has to hide in your shadow all the time, though it seems that Zant has found a way. Thus, your goal in this game is to give Midna the power to defeat Zant by gathering a trio of evil artifacts called Fused Shadows. Oh yeah, sounds good. Totally not dubious of this plan at all. Yeah, let's do it. Not to mention, Link is nothing more than a folk hero. I mean, sure, he can fight off the local tribe of goblins, but saving the world? Poor guy seems a little out of his depth here. But here is where the game plays a lot of its strongest cards: the exploration, the combat, and the dungeon design. Ocarina of Time gave us the first 3D version of the iconic Hyrule Field, an expansive area that players could have only dreamed of seeing back in the days of the Nintendo 64. It was huge, expansive, and completely empty. Like, not a lot happens here. The Hyrule Field in Twilight Princess, however, is enormous. So huge that you start the game with a horse in order to cover it all. And a lot happens here. Like what, you ask? Well, there's that time you have to move a sick kid to a doctor who can treat him, but the wagon gets attacked by bandits and you have to fend them off and put out any fires they set at the same time. Oh, but then another kid gets kidnapped and you have to chase his kidnapper down while his minions try to stop you, ending with a jousting duel on a burning bridge that's stupidly hard but crazy satisfying when you actually win, and then you have to fight him later, but you have a bow and arrow this time, so it's a way different fight. What happens in a Hyrule Field in Ocarina of Time that isn't a cutscene? You dive in the water and pick up the ocarina. That's literally it. Twilight Princess is full of stuff to do and places to explore. It is literally so large that you now have to collect 5 pieces of heart to make a full one rather than the usual 4. You're constantly seeing places and things that are clearly supposed to have a special item used on them, and you're all like, man, I can't wait to come back here once I get that item. Hyrule Castle Town feels vibrant and lived in, acting as the perfect central hub for the game's world. A place that feels safe and inviting in a way that it isn't in Breath of the Wild. Unless you're as good at that game as I am. Yes, that's the Hylian shield. Yes, I only have 4 hearts. Deal with it. I actually only had 3 when I got it. And while the world is huge, it's also manageable. Not only do you start with a freaking Clydesdale horse to ride around on, once you gain the ability to change between human and wolf form at will, it unlocks a fast travel system with a network already built from your prior exploration. And you don't have to play any weird songs, you just talk to Midna and click where you want to go. And the world takes on a whole new vibe when under the effects of Twilight. You get this foggy, otherworldly feel which is only enhanced by a soundtrack that, and I hate to use this analogy, sounds like something out of Silent Hill. This unsettling atmosphere is, I think, a huge part of the game's appeal. I mean, yeah, a lot of the characters' models are, less than charming, to put it charitably. It would take a couple more games for them to really pin the style down, but I think it fits the mood that the game was going for. Hyrule is essentially at peace, but something is wrong. And that manifests itself throughout the game, sometimes in ways you get to experience. Zant's power has had a debilitating effect on various parts of Hyrule, freezing the waters of the Zora Kingdom, the leader of the Mountain Gorons having been driven mad by darkness, and one you experience yourself when the forest you play in with the kids gets shrouded in a poisonous mist. This world still needs fixing, and Link has the tools for the job. Now, it's worth mentioning that there are essentially 2 different versions of Twilight Princess. The GameCube version and the Wii version, which as a result use 2 vastly different control schemes. While the GameCube version plays like previous Zelda games, the Wii version integrates those dreaded motion controls. Rather than hitting a button to swing your sword, you waggle the Wiimote, something that actually caused a huge design rift between the 2 games. You see, Link is traditionally a southpaw, but since most people are right-handed, I guess having Link swing with his left hand when the player swung right would have been immersion breaking. My sincerest apologies to left-handed people everywhere. The astonishing thing is how they fixed this. How did they make this change? By flipping Link's character model? No! By flipping the entire game! The map for the Wii version is literally a mirror image of the one on the GameCube, which is why the footage I've been using might seem confusing for some of you. And you'll often find that people will claim that the GameCube version is the better version thanks to its lack of gimmicky motion controls, but I would like to make a counter-argument to that. First of all, can I just gush over how great the Wiimote's configuration is for a minute? Unlike regular controllers, the Wiimote instead connects to its control stick through a tether. Now, this is meant to allow players to still use the motion controls without interfering with your other hand, but it has the effect of making this a dang comfortable controller scheme. The tether means that I can relax my arms and hold the controller pieces to my sides, rather than having to hunch over a controller. Secondly, the people who called Nintendo's motion controls a gimmick, well, they were right. Fortunately, the devs of Twilight Princess knew that the first iteration of the Wiimote just wasn't up to the job of complicated swordplay, and so thankfully limited any motion antics to just needing a wiggle, any wiggle that it can detect. However, where this thing shines is with ranged combat. You might notice that a lot of your early game items, the slingshot, boomerang, bow and arrow, hookshot, are all long-range tools, and this is where the big game changer comes in: gyro aiming. You see, I have a condition called dysgraphia, where my fingers have trouble making precise gestures. Admittedly, it's just dipping my toe into the shallow end of motor disability, but it means that I have the handwriting of a 6-year-old and I absolutely suck at first-person shooters. I mean, even if I know exactly how much I need to move to fix a shot, that doesn't necessarily translate to the right gesture in my hands, and I watch as my reticule wobbles past my target for the 5th time. Yeah, don't expect me to become a Fortnite streamer anytime soon. But during development, one Shigeru Miyamoto, you might have heard of him, could tell that the Wiimote wasn't much of a motion sensor, but it was a brilliant light gun. Gyro controls changed everything for me. Able to aim with less precise motor function meant that I could finally enjoy games that require this level of accuracy, and Twilight Princess makes full use of it. This is why, to me, the Wii version is the definitive version because of just how much fun and immersive the light gun aiming controls turn out to be. Heck, this combined with the waggle controls means that you can load the controllers into the Wii Zapper and play the game one-handed. I mean it, it's awesome! As for the actual sword combat, while it borrows the Z targeting system from Ocarina, it also borrows a lot of its flaws. You have to lock yourself in a duel with whatever you're fighting, you have to wait for an opening, yada yada. All lovingly detailed in this expletive-riddled rant from ex-cartoon guy and resident cat whisperer Aaron Hansen in his series Sequelitis.
The source of a lot of Ocarina's problems is that the game's idea of difficulty is waiting. Every enemy has a period where they just stand around, and attacking them during this time is useless. Waiting is not a difficult thing to do, but it creates the illusion of difficulty because it takes up your time.
Yeah, that's a problem, Aaron, but you know who noticed that problem before you did? Enter the hidden skills, special techniques designed to let you seize the momentum in combat. Now, while hints of these techniques such as the Helm Splitter and Backslice existed in the previous game Wind Waker, they were still limited to counter moves that you did automatically when a button lit up because little babbies need help with their little babby games. In Twilight Princess, these moves are instead done with special commands which can be performed at any time, giving them much more meaning when it comes to combat. You have to notice the openings to try these moves or even use them yourself to try to break a stalemate. Even the first move you learn, the ending blow, requires you to get the enemy open to it with your own moves. And that's part of the fun this game provides, options. You have a number of ways to try to engage each problem, not even just in close combat. Like at one point you have the task of storming the hideout of the bandits who attacked your village and you gotta ask yourself, do you go in sword swinging, or do you carefully take everybody out from a quarter mile away using the special Hawkeye item from that optional side quest that you definitely did, right? It's a precursor to one of Breath of the Wild's most beloved features, as you have to decide in the moment, do I smack him with my shield and follow up with a Helm Splitter, or do I roll behind them for a backslice? This added layer of complexity makes fighting a blast as you search for the best method of attack, and enemies become a breeze once you get these techniques down pat. Link fights like a beast in this game. He's jumping and rolling around, delivering the first blow, finishing off his hit combo with a two-handed haymaker, and even letting out roars when he unleashes his strongest techniques. And then there's horse combat, all made manifest in those chase sequences I mentioned before. Rather than locking into a duel, you have to manage a lot of things at once, like keeping steady on your target while dealing with flanking cavalry, and bringing up your bow means dropping your reins so your horse will just blunder into whatever obstacle is in front of you, so you have to switch between these two, and these get pretty crazy, huh, Aaron?
Man, that took it out of me.
Oof, okay, we're fine.
I'm still like schwitzing over here.
I know, I'm quelling.
However, fighting is far from the most distinguishing feature of a Zelda game. I personally refer to Zelda games as tool-based exploration games, where you explore areas with an increasing arsenal of neat gadgets. And this game really pushes that angle. I mean, you don't even get a magic meter. And while there are plenty of places in the open world to use these features, they get most of their use in Legend of Zelda's most defining feature, the dungeons. One thing that's pretty clear in the dungeons of Twilight Princess is that the game expects a bit more of you than normal. There isn't really any simple dungeon to cut your teeth on in the beginning unless you count the woods or the prison. At the beginning, it follows tradition with the usual forest, fire, and water-themed dungeons, but all of them are visually breathtaking. Rather than the untouched temples of other games, these feel like decaying or even lived-in spaces. They're not just dungeons, they're mines, manors, or even cities. The dungeons are all about engaging moments and interesting mechanics, whether it be saving monkeys so they can get you across long gaps, twisting a staircase to direct the flow of water, and gathering soup ingredients? Trust me, it's actually really charming. The dungeons are great, with tons of puzzles and maybe not the most complicated structure, instead opting to divide the dungeons into digestible chunks that make it easy to pick up where you left off if you save or quit and get a game over. But the best part is that you don't even notice that. The dungeons don't feel condescending the way they did in Wind Waker or Skyward Sword, because there are so many interesting things to do and unique ways of solving puzzles. Many puzzles involve figuring out several things at once, such as figuring out how to electrify these ore deposits. You then need to bring in a little outside knowledge to realize that you just made a huge electromagnet, so maybe you should put on those heavy boots made out of a ferrous material, jump off, and oh my god! That's an awesome moment, helped by the fact that you have to bring in outside knowledge, which generates a pretty cool brain blast once you figure it out. The dungeons also tend to make a lot of use of previous dungeon items. The iron boots let you not only walk on ceilings, they let you easily sink and walk underwater, resist air currents, and even anchor you in place to toss big rock dudes over your shoulder. A took the worst item in Ocarina of Time and made it awesome. How did they do that? And this idea even carries over to the bosses. Now, Twilight Princess's bosses aren't really hard fights. That sort of thing is left to the mid-bosses, which pose the real combat challenge. And Darknut's a freaking cheater, by the way. Instead, the bosses are more of a pop quiz about the dungeon. Of course, they make use of the dungeon item, which has already completely changed how you explore the area, but a lot of them ask you for just a bit more. Take Fyrus, the boss of the Goron Mines. Like a lot of typical Legend of Zelda bosses, the goal is to hit him in the glowing weak point, he falls over, and we have fun little swordy times, rinse and repeat twice more, end of fight. So we shoot him in the weak point, he staggers around, and he falls over. Any second now. Guys, he's not falling over. Dang it, Legend of Awesome, you lied to me! But then you see the chains on his feet, and if you've been paying attention, you will remember that there was a puzzle that involved using the iron boots to anchor yourself when pulling these chains. So you grab the chains, put on the iron boots, and sure enough... That's an edge that Twilight Princess has in a lot of its bosses, is that they also require you to remember a dungeon puzzle in order to defeat it. Like the first fight against early boss Diababa, where its weakness is these insect bombs which pop out of these holes, so it does the sensible thing and destroys them all. But fortunately, one of the monkeys that you saved before helps you by swinging past with them held in his feet, requiring that you remember that your dungeon item, the fairy boomerang, can not only bring items back to you, but it can also take an item somewhere else, which was also used for a dungeon puzzle. The dungeon is teaching you how to fight the boss. I feel a lot of people kind of miss this because they don't realize they've made this connection thanks to the dungeon's design, so I feel the need to point it out. A lot of Twilight Princess's puzzles are less about trial and error and more about making connections in a way that prevents you from just whacking the puzzle with a stick until it's solved. And did I talk about the presentation yet? Every dungeon feels distinct not only with its puzzles, but also in its experience. This truly comes to fruition in the game's most beloved dungeon, Snow Peak Ruins. You're sort of tricked into going into this mansion, a rundown estate with a pair of Yeti squatters too big to be bothered by the monsters infesting the place, and the narrative involves exploring the mansion to hunt down ingredients so the big Yeti man can make a healthy soup for his sick wife, which he'll also let you sample for a healing item. I'm not even gonna spoil the best part of this dungeon because it's just that great, but its unusual approach makes it one of the most standout dungeons in all of Zelda. The Lake Bed Temple is also a favorite of mine. In my opinion, the Water Temple of Ocarina of Time gave the designers carte blanche to make one super frustrating, hair-pulling dungeon in every game, like Termina Bay or Vana Boris, and that easily applies to Lake Bed Temple's unique design. With better swimming controls and a unique central gimmick, it makes for a nice brain tickler. It also led to this priceless exchange. So I was in a game store and I was talking with somebody about Twilight Princess back when it was still new. And I was all, yeah, I love the game, but I'm stuck. And so he said, yeah, Water Temple, right? That thing is so hard. And I was like, oh no, I beat that. I'm stuck in the Air Temple. And he was like, Air Temple? The City in the Sky, another top-notch late-game dungeon which takes one of the game's most beloved items, the Claw Shot, and literally gives you double your pleasure, double your fun by giving you 2 hook shots. Of course, people mostly remember the Spider-Man antics that happened here, but I remember actually anticipating this item showing up when I found a Spider-Man puzzle in the field where I had just one, and I was like, oh man, am I gonna get another one of these? And when I did, I knew the first thing I was gonna do with them once I was done with the dungeon. And the music! Wind Waker was the first Zelda game that used an adaptive soundtrack where the music changes depending on what's happening on screen, such as during different parts of a fight. Here, that gets expanded upon, with every boss and even every sub-boss getting their own combat theme, which all have punctuations on different stages of the fight. And a lot of these are real bangers, even the one where you fight a literal butt monkey. And then when you knock the boss down and it's vulnerable, you get this energized burst of music to really capture the feeling of turning the tide. There are also a lot of callbacks to the score of Ocarina of Time, which makes sense as music was such an important part of that game, such as the Minuet of Water, the best version of the Goron theme, and of course, Zelda's Lullaby. Although I have to say my funniest memory of Twilight Princess was the first time I fought Armagoma, the giant spider boss of the Temple of Time. After you defeat it and think you've won, this happens. This is technically supposed to be a gag finale as the main eye will go down in a single hit, but thing was, the first time I played this game, when this stage of the fight started, I had half a heart of health left and was totally out of healing items. One of those spiderlings biting me or a misplaced bomb meant instant death! So that entire stage of the fight was a tense back and forth of me going, no. But as ridiculous as that moment was, I look back on that memory fondly, as even though today I know the game backwards and forwards and can easily take on anything it can dish out, there was a time where it really challenged me. Like I said, the first Zelda I ever finished. So don't forget, even as bland and straightforward as some of your favorite old games might seem today, remember, there is a time where it challenged you and was a realm full of discovery, or perhaps the best game ever made. I know I feel that way. I'm never going to say that Ocarina of Time is a bad game, just that its time is over. It was great when it first landed, but the franchise has moved on in directions I don't think anybody ever considered. We might actually be a point where the 3D linear Zeldas get pushed aside in favor of open world freedom and all of these games go obsolete. Yeah, I don't fault the game at all for invoking a lot of Ocarina of Time's designs, because that intent was clear from the beginning, and in fact was what a lot of people were asking for. But they didn't just stop there. They fixed and iterated on Ocarina's problems with story, combat, pacing, and exploration. Wow, just about everything now that I think about it. Is it kind of fan-servicey? Yeah, but at least it does so in a smart way. Your sword mentor doesn't do anything corny like go, well, you know, it's dangerous to go alone, take this, before handing you your wooden sword or something. That would have been awful. Every piece of reused music is used correctly, like using the Song of Healing and Requiem of Spirit to communicate with the ghostly hero's shade. And these songs are iconic and memorable. You literally had to memorize them back in the N64 games, so bringing them back ties in with one of Zelda's most important motifs as well. It's also not the only game Twilight Princess drew from. We also get the Postman from Majora's Mask, the Lantern from Link to the Past, and even bomb arrows from Link's Awakening. Hey, I missed those! I mean, I guess if there was anything I didn't like about the game, aside from the obvious telling you what a rupee is worth every time you pick one up whenever you fire up the game, it's the forced romance with Ilia, the mayor's daughter. Link to me is at his best when he's more of an open-ended character, a nobody who has to earn the trust of those around him, which is a huge part of this game and my second favorite game, Majora's Mask. And while one of my criticisms of Ocarina of Time is that it's the waifu game, seeing it go so far the other way has led me to appreciate it a bit more. Ilia is just so bland, to the point where even losing her memory doesn't really change her at all. Besides, we all know that Ashe is this game's one true waifu. And yeah, the quest for the Skyletters is a total pace killer and reeks of those awful padding quests from the Metroid Prime games, but at least you have fast travel and each one comes with a treasure chest with a cool item inside, so it's not a total waste. Getting back into the story, so spoiler warning from here on out, after getting the final fused shadow from the bottom of Lakebed Temple, Link and Midna get ambushed by Zant, who breaks the light spirit and reduces Link to wolf form once again. He tries to coerce Midna into joining him, but Midna refuses, so Zant restores the light spirit, forcing Midna to take the full brunt of its aura. Can I just point out that this was evil on a whole nother level? It's one thing to fatally wound someone, it's quite another to inflict said wound using someone unwilling as your accomplice. And so, with Link stuck in wolf form and Midna fatally wounded, Zant leaves with the fused shadows and the player is again left helpless. Rushing to Hyrule Castle, Link again finds anybody who could help him shrink away in fright. People keep saying that Wolf Link sucks, but it works so well thematically here like it did in Ordon Village. It's rare that a Legend of Zelda game manages to hit you with such a low point so far into the game. By this point, you tend to have a number of handy items, extra health, and confidence, and while you might hit some setbacks, never has a game managed this sort of despair. Especially in the way the player feels. You're supposed to be the big hero guy, and yet now you can't do anything. Finally making it to the castle, Zelda saves Midna by doing something, though Midna seems to realize what it is as she tries to get Link to stop her, but It's too late. Midna is healed, and Zelda has disappeared. Link and Midna head to the decrepit Temple of Time to retrieve the Blade of Evil's Bane, the Master Sword, and purge the curse of Wolf Link forever. Having to pull out essentially the last resort just to shake off a curse? Man, we're really in it now, huh? Midna knows that their only hope now is to chase Zant into the Twilight Realm using a magic mirror found in a place called Arbiter's Grounds, which also happens to be the location of King Bulblin's hideout. You're taking a huge risk trying to storm this place, but frankly, you're out of options. Things are tense, sneaking around Bulblin's camp, trying to pick off guards and avoid setting off any alarm, only to get cornered and ambushed by Bulblin himself. This has got to be my favorite part of this game, as this tense segment is capstoned by the two of you having a showdown in a burning building. Also, can I just say how great a character Bulblin is? He's the first real rival we've ever gotten in a Zelda game, but unlike foppish characters like Vati or Girahim, his confrontations are pure and simple, and he's a lot more intelligent than he lets on, constantly able to goad Link into taking drastic action, predicting his movements, and all without saying a word. Though he finally drops his dummy facade when he speaks with surprising eloquence at their final encounter. I actually forgot how fun he was to fight until I replayed this game again recently. I love this guy and hope he comes back in a later game. I don't care how. Anyway, after clearing the undead nightmare that is Arbiter's Grounds, using Link's new ability to swap forms for the first time, oh god, no! We find that Zant has beaten us here as well, and broken the mirror apart. It's also here that we learn some pressing details. You see, while Ganondorf did get thwarted, it wasn't before he had gotten the Triforce of Power, which Zant is currently borrowing strength from. It also turns out that Link and Zelda had inherited the Triforces of Courage and Wisdom from their ancestors, not so much to make them chosen ones, but rather as a source of power kept in reserve in case of trouble. These Triforce pieces are also why Link and Zelda don't turn into spirits like everybody else. Instead, their Triforces cause Link to turn into a wolf, Ganon to turn into a pig, and Zelda to turn into, brunette. And the reason Princess Zelda had disappeared was because she had given the Triforce of Wisdom to Midna in order to save her life. Oh, and did I mention Midna's also a princess?
Disputes.
Yeah, Midna calling Zelda the Twilight Princess early on was actually a fake out, and Midna herself is the real princess of the Twilight Realm, also reduced to a helpless form when Zant overthrew her. I know Zelda's role here has been subdued, but you really have been working with a princess this whole time, something Zelda herself doesn't manage until Spirit Tracks. Taking advantage of Zant's hubris, Link and Midna managed to recover the 3 missing shards of the mirror and reconstruct it in order to chase him into the Twilight Realm. The fight is deranged as the power of the Triforce and Link's surprise arrival has caused Zant to totally lose his mind. But when Zant is finally laid low, Midna recovers the fused shadows but lashes out when Zant taunts her, freeing Ganondorf from his prison. The end is in sight. Midna uses the overflowing power of the fused shadows to shatter Ganondorf's barrier and together with Link storms Hyrule Castle to confront Ganondorf, freeing Zelda from his control, taking out his Twilight-cursed boar form, and teaming up with Zelda to fight him on horseback, and then, as the perfect cherry on top, a mano-a-mano sword fight with Ganondorf himself. Any disappointment people felt with Zant being replaced by the same guy we've been fighting every game is totally erased here. This is it, the GameCube trailer coming to life, the epic duel we've been salivating for since Ocarina, a fight that takes all of your skill, reflexes, and mastery of the hidden techniques to even stand a chance against this mountain of a man. Or you could just whip out the fishing pole, which stuns him and makes him a total joke. If you're a loser...
Loser! You're a loser! You make me sick, you big baby!
It's great, though. It is so satisfying to prove that you have mastered the skills necessary to thwart evil. And to top it off, you finish the fight with the first hidden skill you ever learned. So that's Twilight Princess. For Nintendo, it was the right game at the right time, and a perfect saving throw to salvage the series after Wind Waker. It started propelling the Wii into the legendary console it ended up becoming, and even merited an HD remake despite being just one generation removed from the console it was remade for. It is a masterpiece, proof that rather than always trying to innovate, sometimes you just need to stick to your guns and make the sort of game people are expecting. The over 8 million copies sold was a franchise record until Breath of the Wild. To me, this is a perfect Zelda game, one with an epic story which takes you on a bit of a linear path, but that leaves it to you to figure it out how to get there and gives you plenty of rewards for doing your own thing. It's got memorable moments, great music, unforgettable characters, and my favorite version of Link, and I'm happy to see that in recent weeks while I was making this video, a lot of other people have come around on the game as well.
Dude, this part rules.
This is cool.
I'm just gonna say, very creative.
And I have neglected to mention things like the weird atmosphere of the city in the sky, and yes, the sheer originality of Snow Peak Ruins. I do admit I might have given that stuff short shrift in my single-minded obsession over structure and gameplay.
It's epic, it's fun, it's huge, and that is why I can say with confidence that Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess is awesome. Hey, thanks again for watching. Making this video actually meant a lot to me, and I'm glad that I made it at a time when Zelda was re-entering the discourse, so hopefully this can go somewhere. If this video gets enough traction, maybe I'll fire up my old Patreon again. I really need to fix that thing. The model I tried before just really wasn't working out. But anyway, maybe if I get enough Patreon support or enough views on this video, I'll try to do more stuff like this. I really hope I can. Anyway, this was fun. Thanks again for watching, and this is Kodak signing off.